Ryan, would you help me bring this to you guys? Grab that, put it up front. We're going to do this one a little bit different tonight. Tom, thank you for coming tonight, sir. So Mr. Pauken will get 2 minutes for an opening statement, then I'll ask him a few questions, and he'll get a 2 minute. You don't even need rebuttal cards tonight. Oh yeah, you get a microphone. There
Do I get an extra minute for a rebuttal?
No rebuttal.
My opponent didn't show up.
No, go ahead. You take that one. That's good.
Is this all right? Yeah. Thank you very much. You know, there's two sayings that I think reflect the times we're in. The first one is a government big enough to give you anything you want is powerful enough to take away everything you have. A saying from one of our founders, William Penn, who said, "Those who refuse to govern by the laws of God will be ruled by tyrants." And we're here at Grace Community Church, and I'm reminded of the pilgrims who came over in the Mayflower Compact, and their first words were, "In the name of God, amen." And how far we've strayed from the time that I was a young man to what we faced today. In the words of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, even in this culture, men have forgotten God. So what are we to do about it? We're worried about the future for our children, our grandchildren. Texas has got to lead this nation back. Even in San Antonio, where the Battle of the Alamo took place, we recently saw an incredibly anti-Christian bias ordinance put in place by the most left-wing government in the history of that city. A government effectively ruled by the Alinskyans. Many of you know about them, some may not. I date back to the mid-'60s when I led a student effort to support our soldiers in Vietnam who were being defamed by a group of campus radicals. They were called the SDS crowd at that time. We beat them. I then later joined the Army, wound up in Vietnam, got out of politics, got married to my wife, settled down, got frustrated when I saw the fall of Saigon, a war we could have won and should have. Got back involved as part of the Reagan Revolution. Excuse me, I think I got an extra minute here. Is that correct? Excuse me. Got involved in the Reagan Revolution on the President's transition team, White House staff, and also was head of the federal agency, the most left-wing agency at the time, called Action. We defunded $20 million in Alinsky organizations getting money, our tax dollars, all over the country, including in San Antonio, Texas. I was helped in that effort by a young man by the name of Mark Levin, who has endorsed me in this race for governor. I later was elected state party chairman in 1994, re-elected, put the social and economic conservatives back together, built the party from the grassroots up. Most recently, and I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't been asked to go back in and chair the Texas Workforce Commission, and I thought things in Austin were very similar to what we were trying to do in the Reagan administration, but they're not, ladies and gentlemen. They're not the same at all. I led an effort to do something about an education system, and I don't care whether it's Common Core, which is dead wrong, or No Child Left Behind, which is dead wrong, whether by a Democrat administration or by a Republican administration. It's a top-down, centralized control of education. I led an effort to undo that here in Texas by returning power to the local communities, local districts, and at the same time encouraging vocational education, because we as conservatives believe in a hand up, not a handout. These are serious times. We need real leadership, not sound bites, not talking points. These are a battle for our Second Amendment rights, our 10th Amendment rights, our private property rights. I've been in the fight for a long time, but we've got to put a team together. It's too much about loyalty to individual politicians. We've got to build a new conservative team to lead this nation back, and Texas has to show the way. Thank you very much.
And by the way, after 2 innings, it is 0-0, nobody scoring. Sox and Cardinals are still tied in game 2. Okay, all right. So Tom, let's talk taxes a little bit.
Sure.
You know, we talked a lot last night about getting rid of the property tax, what's the right way to tax, what is your philosophy on taxes, and how can we lower or abolish the property tax? What would you recommend doing to restructure our tax system?
Okay, 1993, I led the effort to defeat Ann Richards' attempt to put in the Robin Hood school finance scheme, which took local school property taxes from some districts and redistributed them elsewhere. It's fundamentally wrong. From a principled standpoint, local property taxes should stay local. It was also double taxation of property taxes in certain districts. Today it amounts to 373 districts that see $1.1 billion of their money go elsewhere and be redistributed with no local control. I led that effort when she put it in as a constitutional amendment, or tried to. We defeated it by 2-1. I'm the one that led it. Other people got involved and we defeated it. Helped defeat her in 1994. Then she put it in legislatively. 2 governors later, it's still there. My opponent, Greg Abbott, defends it as legal and constitutional. It is not. We have a state property tax, prohibition against a statewide property tax. That is what Robin Hood is. We'll get rid of it. We'll also got to do something about appraisal creep and higher property taxes. I led an effort called Governor's Task Force on Appraisal Reform. Unfortunately, those good recommendations to get property taxes under control were never enacted. As governor, I'll push them through.
Let's do a follow-up on that. Sorry, go ahead. Let's do a follow-up on that with the appraisal caps. I think it was 2003, if I remember right, when there was a big fight on that, and you know, there's been efforts to cap it at 5 and 3. I can't remember what California did and their prop, but how does that actually work? And what would be the
Here's
effect?
what you have in Texas today. You've got a 10% on homestead, so you can raise your homestead every year by 10%. You have no cap on non-homestead property. What we recommend and what I would like to see done is take the homestead cap from 10% to 5% and 10% the maximum. And that's a beginning. We've got to get away from our excessive reliance on property taxes. You have a perpetual lien on your property. You never own your property, even if you pay the mortgage. That has to change.
So I know this is a federal issue, you're running for governor, but since we're talking taxes, then is the sales tax, the consumption tax, is that the way to go, or do you go income tax? But what's the alternative?
Now, what I have recommended in my book, Bringing America Home, and you can go to tompauken.com. We also have tompaukenfortexas.com, which is my gubernatorial race, which lays out an alternative. We've got to get rid of the corporate income tax, and we'll begin. We got to get rid of income tax completely. But let's begin with the corporate income tax, 35% raise. Income tax rate, 7.65 employer portion of the payroll tax. You reward debt while punitively taxing capital investment, savings, and investment, which are the engines of economic growth. We've lost 1/3 of our U.S. manufacturing base. We need to bring jobs home to America, and you replace the 35% rate, the employer portion of the payroll tax, with an 8% border-adjusted consumption tax. All goods and services come into the U.S. are taxed. All exports get a tax credit against your business consumption tax, with levels of playing field with our trading competitors. Do you know we're on average at a 17% disadvantage with our trading competitors, 19% with certain European nations, 17% with China. This needs to end. We've got to have bold ideas. We can't just be talking in cliches. We've got to reach out beyond our base and bring jobs home to America and rebuild our manufacturing base. And that's the beginning of doing that.
I get the strangest feeling you've actually thought about this a little bit. So let's talk about jobs and the free market. What is, in your estimation, the proper role for state government in terms of job creation and intervention in the economy or the free market?
Well, government doesn't create jobs, only the private sector does. As my friend, the late Jack Kemp, liked to say, a rising tide lifts all boats. We lead the nation in private sector job creation. That has to continue. I've been involved in the private sector. I've been involved in encouraging job creation. One of our biggest problems, and the problem that I fought for 4 years, and we finally got something done about it, is we've got a shortage of skilled workers. We've neglected, almost denigrated vocational education. And you've got to address that issue really from 2 standpoints. Employers are worried about a graying workforce. Average age of a plumber, 56, of a welder, 55, stonemasonry craftsman, 69. We've got great opportunities. You heard the candidates talk about natural gas. Great opportunities to expand manufacturing, but you've got to provide opportunities for young people, both at the high school level and also in the post-secondary level, to have more opportunities for vocational and technical education to meet the demand for those good skilled jobs. It's a win-win situation for people who are needed and also people who have an opportunity. As the old saying is, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. We need to get back to that fundamental principle.
I I was trying to think of the Ron Swanson quote about teach a man to fish, fish is not meat, or something like that. Anyway, Parks and Rec thing. Okay, so C-Scope. What is your position on C-Scope, and how do we get rid of it or fix it, or what would you?
Well, look, throw it all out. But look, who's in charge? Who's in charge? I mean, we've had Republican officials in charge. And you got University of Texas, which had a friend of mine, Rob Coons, who had a wonderful Western civilization program, and the leftist professors didn't like it, and they killed it. Now, I wrote a letter, tried to do something about it as chairman of the Texas Workforce Commission, but who cared about that? They might care a little more as the governor of Texas. But the leftist professors did this. We've got to be concerned about content. The Italian communists said, capture the culture and you will capture the country. And the left, the 60s counterculture has become the dominant culture. We've got to take the culture back. And you've got to provide curriculum management help for particularly the rural districts, but do it with sound content. Pay attention to it. Put people in charge who are serious about it and understand Western civilization and our values and what's being taught to our kids, and make sure it's sound. Now, fortunately, I got on the horn to Ken Hance after that Western civilization program was killed at UT, put Rob Coons in touch with Ken Hance, and thankfully Ken Hance has put in place a Western civilization program at Texas Tech. So there's ways to fight back and get done what needs to be done. We can't ignore this and let the left capture academia.
It's interesting. You mentioned Bob Coons. Bob Coons actually this year and last year spoke at Patriot Academy and did a great job of laying out conservative philosophy. And so these kids that we're teaching in our school system, and the problem with C-Scope and Common Core and all that, you mentioned the system for figuring out what the curriculum is going to be. That one of the biggest problems are these regional centers and the lack of oversight there, and they become a business unto themselves. How do you fix that?
Rick, I don't think it's. I think it's that they're not paying attention. Look, 3 years ago, I was chairman of the Texas Workforce Commission and saw an example of this out in Marshall, Texas. Came back, got hold of the head of the State Board of Education, Lowe at the time. She did something about it. But the problem is we're not paying attention. You're not putting people in charge who have solid grounding in Western civilization and our principles. And I mean, the Rob Coonses are out there. They're here in Texas. There are people all over the state, and I've met in the campaign. Incredible, talented people in the public and private school system, people with incredible backgrounds, but we're not paying attention to this stuff. It's all about crony capitalism, Austin insiders, big money, take care of the deals. Don't ruffle feathers because you might get some big institution upset. This stuff, we have to lead the way on every front, culturally as well as economically. And we can do it, and we got to have the best schools in Texas, and we can do in the country, and we can do that as well. But we got to get serious about some of this stuff. We're like on autopilot down there in Austin.
Last question, and we're going to have the Attorney General candidates here a little bit later and get into a little bit of this. But as governor, what would you prioritize as the battles for our Attorney General to take on against the federal government? Obviously, there's constant conflict there with the encroachment of the federal government's power. What would be your priority for?
Well, it isn't just about filing lawsuits, and that's important. But the reality is you got to be proactive. Let me give you a couple of examples. I mean, we had a Republican in the White House. Why didn't our governor go up to Washington and say, let's get a waiver for Medicaid like Rhode Island got one? Now, we got the Voting Rights Act. We had control of the White House. We had control of the Senate and the House. Why didn't our Attorney General go up there to Washington and say, look, don't put Texas under the Voting Rights Act jurisdiction of the Department of Justice for another 25 years. We're not being proactive. We've got to be proactive. You got to understand the left is at it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We got to put a new conservative team together. We got to be at them as well. And we got to go about it the right way. And we got to unite our social and economic conservatives and divide the Democrats and put the left on the defensive. They're way out of tune with most Democrats and independents in this state and in this nation. But it's up to us to make the case. And we're not doing a good job of it, in my estimation.
2 minute close.
You know, I headed a federal agency in the Reagan administration. We had something called the Grace Commission, a group of outsiders, civic and business leaders who came in and identified what are the essential services, what are the non-essential services, how do we identify savings and efficiencies, and then we implemented. I did at our agency. I did more with less at the Action Agency. We cut the budget by 25%, the bureaucracy in half. Don't tell me you can't cut government spending. We've got to have a comparable commission, and I will put one in place in the transition of outside civic and business leaders coming to Austin, identifying what are the essential services, what are the non-essential services. For example, we got $50 million now going to Emerging Technology Fund. That's crony capitalists, picking winners and losers. It's wrong whether the federal government does, it's wrong whether the state government does. I'll eliminate that. I will eliminate that, and I'll apply that $50 million to border security. We've got to defend our own borders, and we'll put leaders in place to do it. And with all due respect, Greg Abbott's been there for 10 years and has done zero about border security. We've got to have real leadership, not sound bites. And these are serious issues, these are serious times. We show by good, sound, conservative policies, putting people together, we can lead this nation back on the right track. If Texas doesn't do it, who is going to do it? Let's put a new team of people together, people committed like we were, so that there's hope and opportunity for the next generation of young Texans and young Americans like there was for us when we grew up. Let's not say these were the best days in the past. They can be good days again. But without us working together, without us building a new conservative team, and I'm proud to say I was the only state official who supported a lot of those young conservative challengers who are now in the Texas House. Without that, we're not going to get this country back on the right track. As governor of Texas, I'll work with you, I'll work for you, and we'll put a new team together to have this country go back in the right direction and take America back for the sake of our children and for our grandchildren. I would appreciate very much your support. Tom Pauken. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to take a just under 10-minute break.